Magandang umaga po mga kaibigan. Sa atin po namang pagtatanghal ngayong araw na ito, pag-uusapan po natin ang ilang mahalagang bagay may kinalaman po naman sa halalan. Sapagkat dito po sa ating bansa, isang mahalagang bagay ang halalan, ang political exercises. Sapagkat dito nakikita ang magagaling, ang mga nag-aalok ng kanilang paglilingkod sa taong bayan, at ang ika nga pagpili ng mga mamamayan ng kanilang mga inaakalang magagaling at maaasahang mga pinuno ng bansa. Pero papaano ba tayo bumoboto? Papaano ba tayo namimili? Ano ba ang ating pamantayan? Ano ba ang ating ika nga basis? So today, we're joined by experts. Kasama natin si Director James Jimenez, ang tagapagsalita ng Commission on Elections. Kasama natin ang mamaya ng konti si Ginoong Gas Lagman, dating Commissioner ng COMELEC. Nasa linya na rin, kasama natin si Professor Danilo Araw, na siya po namang nangangasiwa sa grupong Kontradaya. At makakasama rin si Attorney Ona Caritos, ang Executive Director ng Legal Network for Truthful Elections. Kasama na rin natin si Ginoong Eric Albia, Secretary General ng Movement for National Elections. Ito po yung National Movement for Free Elections o yung NAMFREL. Let's start with our good friend, Director James Jimenez, to update us on the latest tungkol sa pagpapatala ng mga bagong botante. Good morning, Director.
Good morning, Melo, and good morning to everyone. Magandang umaga po. Well, ang latest update natin is that medyo mabagal pa rin ang dating ng mga tao sa ating registration centers. Of course, we have exceeded 1 million registrants already, but only just barely. No? As of January 7, I think we've reached the 1 million mark. However, things are still going very slowly. Mostly because hindi pa rin naman nagbabago yung sitwasyon. No? Registration is still just 4 days a week. It's still from Monday to Thursdays only, with Fridays being reserved for disinfection and Saturday and Sunday being non-working days. And our requirements for registration, for allowing people to come to the office to register, are still just as stringent. No? Medyo mababa pa rin yung capacity ng offices ng COMELEC to handle registrants, mainly because we are preventing people from congregating in our offices. However, we are looking forward to hopefully being able to conduct satellite registration events by the end of this month. As the situation develops, no? Medyo nakakalungkot lang na meron na namang pinag-uusapang bagong variant ng COVID, or ng third variant actually ng COVID, which we are monitoring to see what effect it will have on public movement. No? If you remember, nung lumabas yung balita ng second variant, nagkaroon ng pangamba na magka-lockdown again, which didn't happen, thankfully. But we're being very careful. Kasi, as I always say, hanggang ngayon, since September 1, wala pa rin tayong natatalang COVID transmission sa ating mga registration centers. And that's a record we don't want to break. No? So, at this point, we're still erring on the side of caution. But again, with close to 4 million registrations still expected to be processed before the end of registration in September, it's becoming very crucial, becoming very critical that we basically get a move on. No? So hopefully, by the end of this month nga, makapag-roll out na tayo ng mga satellite registration para dumami naman yung capacity natin. The problem kasi is no matter how effectively you call people to the office, if your office naman can handle just a handful at a time, wala din, no? mag-create ka lang actually ng frustration. So again, the most important thing right now is to expand the capacity of the COMELEC offices through satellite registration to accept people who come and register.
Okay. So it's safe to say na doon sa inaasa nating 5 million, may isa na? May
May
isang
1 million na tayo.
nagpaparehistro?
Yes po.
Okay. So yung 4 na milyon, inaasahan natin na makapagpaparehistro sa takdang panahon. Very good. That's nice. Very optimistic tayo dyan. Ginoong Eric Alvia ng NAMFREL, National Movement for Free Elections. How do you look at things going on today? Welcome to the discussion and share us NAMFREL's views.
Well, yes, it's our concern also with almost around 8 months or 9 months before the end of the deadline for the registration. 1 million, as pointed out by James, have gone out to register. So it's not entirely the fault of COMELEC because we know that there are constraints na, no? There are limitations that are imposed by public and health safety regulations. So we have to abide by that. No? So it's very difficult. No? And people also have the tendency to delay things, no, at the very last minute. So regardless of the situation right now, we would still convince people and request people to still reach out to their local COMELEC offices and ask about the details on how to register and also what are the requirements. Kasi ngayon pa lang, you can already initiate your registration by going online. No? Meron ng iRehistro yung COMELEC. No? Of course, the biometrics capture, no? Because it's still a requirement of the law, has to be taken at the COMELEC offices. No? And it's really a concern, and we expect around 3 million new registrants, no, for this 2022 elections. We still haven't considered also those people who have transferred their residences or yung mga lumipat. No? Maraming nagbalik probinsya. No? So syempre yan, no? Kasama na rin yan siguro sa figure na yan. Hindi ko, ang estimate namin dyan, almost mga 2 million. No? Then there is also a concern for later on for overseas voters also. No? How do they register in their respective countries? So these are the things that are a concern specific to voter registration. Right now, we're gearing up also for the preparations, and we're helping out the local COMELECs, no, in making sure that they have the capacity and capability also to run an elections, no, in 2022, given the situation that we have right now. No? Magiging pandemic elections ba to o hindi? By the time do we have real complete rollout of the vaccines that people are confident that they can go out without compromising their health? So these are the considerations that we're going through right now. And it would be good also for us. No? That's why we're also preparing for the Palawan plebiscite, which is around March, no? Mid-March, because it's not only, of course, no, the importance of the issue of breaking up the Palawan province into 3 provinces, no, by a plebiscite, but we also want to see it as a dry run for running an elections in a pandemic condition.
Yeah.
So titingnan natin kung paano mag-prepare talaga ang COMELEC at taong bayan paano mag-react sa ganitong klaseng restrictions na nangyayari. And of course, there are procurements already happening related to the use.
Yeah, that's very nice. So, babantayan natin yung mangyayari sa Palawan kung yung Palawan ay magiging Palawan, Pala 2, Pala 3.
Pala pa.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, babantayan natin yan. Pero I'd like to ask our good friend, Professor Danilo Araw. Professor, you're in touch with college students sa MASCOM, ano? Can you tell us ano ang pulso nila? Yung bang karamihan ng mga estudyante mo ay nakapagparehistro na? At kung nakapagparehistro, bakit sila nagparehistro? At kung hindi pa, bakit ayaw nilang magrehistro?
Yeah, that's a good question. Siyempre mahirap lahatin yung pulso ng kabataan. Kaya lang batay sa karanasan ko, sa pakikipag-ugnayan ko sa kanila, interesado sila sa mangyayaring halalan sa 2022. Kaya pursigido talaga sila na magparehistro. Kaya lang gaya nga ng nabanggit ni James, talagang may mga limitasyon dun sa proseso ng rehistrasyon. At talagang nangangamba tayo na baka magresulta ito sa malawakang disenfranchisement kapag hindi naayos yung sistema ng halalan. Of course, it's a welcome development that the COMELEC is open to having satellite registration that would help clear the backlog of registration despite the pandemic that's going on. Of course, the basic fundamental question would be why has satellite registration not been implemented in the past? Perhaps or right from the very start. Perhaps we can talk about that later on. Kaya lang Melo, yung kailangan din nating idiin dito, what further complicates the preparations for the 2022 elections would be the posturing of some members of the House of Representatives to change the Constitution to the point where they are entertaining the idea of including the changes in the Constitution with the 2022 elections. And the other scenario that's being floated by some analysts and some legislators would be that the current proposal to change the charter may result in the postponement or even the cancellation of the 2022 elections if some legislators would have their way in lifting their term limits. So we always have this no election scenario every time we hold elections, every 3 years or every 6 years in the case of the presidential elections. So the system is very problematic at this particular time, and we hope that the youth and as well as the other not yet registered constituents or citizens of our country would be able to transcend such disillusionment with our policymakers and proceed with the registration. 1 million out of 5 million would be the 4 million backlog should be arrested by the time that we end the registration period, because we cannot afford any postponement of the May 2022 elections. Yun lang po, Melo, sa ngayon. Salamat po.
Okay. Yes, reaction from the good director. Director James, please.
Singit lang ako, sir.
Please.
Yung sinasabi ni Sir Danny, tama po yun. Palagi na lang, every time there's an election rolling around, no, someone is trying to push forward a no-L scenario. And the reason for that, I think, is not that the system, with apologies to Professor Danny, it's not so much that the system is problematic as that people don't punish these jokers who try to change the Constitution every single time they're up for re-election. That's the problem. The problem is that we don't punish them. Kasi, alam mo, if people were to take democracy seriously, then the people themselves would be against any move like that. They would see through any of this politicking nonsense. Unfortunately, we don't do that. As voters, we normally just, let it slide and we say, kasi politiko yan, that's what they'll do. So we expect bad behavior from them. And because we expect bad behavior, we excuse bad behavior. And bad behavior then becomes normal. So Prof. Dan, sensya na. To all the politicians listening.
Yeah. Pero kuminsan kasi, Director, ang sabi nila dyan, yung mga ganong mga panukala, parang Matitrace yan sa isang website. Yun yung kabuhayan.com. Parang may gusto lang kumita somewhere. Fuera de los buenos, no? They can be so, sincere in their desire, but, when you get to elect political jokes, then what do you expect? Diba? Sa problema yun eh. Anyway, si Attorney Ona Caritos. Attorney Ona, good morning. Yes, please. Welcome
Sir,
to
good morning po. Good morning po, Sir Melo. Good morning, Sir Eric, Prof. Danny, and Director James. Thank you for having us and me today again, Sir Melo.
Yeah.
Ano re-reactan ko, sir? Kasi yung minention ni Director James, yung comment niya, it's really one of the bigger problems in our elections, yung electoral competitiveness. Every election po, padami na ng padami yung mga posisyon na walang lumalaban, especially in the local races. So, at the end of the day, yes, the system is a problem, pero we have bigger problems campaign finance, yung pera sa eleksyon, electoral competitiveness, inclusiveness of our elections. Just like earlier, Sir Eric mentioned na kokonti pa yung nagpaparehistro. Director James mentioned that also. And that's one of our concerns also in this election, the inclusiveness and accessibility of our, at this point, registration period. At hindi yan kasalanan lang ng COMELEC. It's because of the ongoing pandemic. So we really have to work, all of us would have to work together para po mahit man lang yung 80% of that 5 million hopefully new registrants for 2022 elections.
Okay. Pero hindi ka ba nagugulat doon sa mga panukala na parang kabuting umuusbong na babaguhin yung saligang batas? Tapos,
Ito talaga po na sinabi ni Prof. Danny, lagi naman yan every election eh. And ako, I take comfort in the fact na pag after the midterm elections, kahit maraming moves to change the Constitution, basing it from our country's history, wala po nababago sa Constitution. So hopefully, mag-ano pa rin yung yung trend na yun, mag-stand pa rin yung trend na yun.
yeah. Pero what makes it more intriguing, meron kang COVID-19 pandemic. Baka mamaya pag ginamit na excuse yung public welfare and public health, adios, patria adorada muna sa eleksyon.
Kaya po, that's why we're really working closely with COMELEC and all other election stakeholders since last year to make changes in our procedure, in our laws, for the government not to use the COVID problem as an excuse to postpone our elections. Kasi kita naman po natin in other countries, mga kapitbahay natin, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Singapore, nakakapag-election naman Indonesia, pinaka-latest last month, nagkaroon sila ng regional elections. So it's not an excuse for the government to postpone our elections. At kaya nga po isa sa mga tinututulan namin dahil po 'di ba may move to postpone the BARM elections. In the explanatory note in the 3 filed bills before the Congress, they were using COVID as an excuse to postpone the BARM elections, and we will be attending that hearing and making a stand na there are factors to postpone the BARM elections, but please do not use COVID as an excuse, as one of the reasons to postpone the BARM elections.
Attorney Ona, there are so many ways to skin a cat. And one of them is to patiently convince the general public that this is the way to do it. And one of the ways that I've learned so far is the effectiveness of a bandwagon approach. Like for example, doon sa mga nakalipas na eleksyon, nakukumbinsi ang publiko na ito ang mananalo dahilan sa mga survey. It's one way of selling the idea, marami palang pumapabor na wag munang ituloy ang eleksyon, which is basically Marcosian. No? Anong tingin niyo ron? Wouldn't they use the same approach?
Pwede ba ako muna sumagot?
Go muna, sige.
Okay. There's such a thing as survey freedom din naman sa usapin ng ng pag-conduct ng iba't ibang mga research, because surveys, if done correctly, at least from an academic viewpoint, would provide the necessary pulse or perception of the respondents who are chosen systematically. Kaya lang maganda rin yung punto mo kasi depende rin yan dun sa timing ng mismong survey. Kung magpapasurvey ka sa panahong ito, kung sino ba yung nararapat na tumakbong presidente, halimbawa, tapos may mga pangalan na magka-crop up, kapag ka hindi malinaw yung metodolohiya ng survey, pwede mong sabihin na ito ay isang instrumento ng mind conditioning. And with regard to the elections, dapat ipatupad pa rin as early as now. Kaya nga kahit sa Contradaya, we want to do voter education even as early as now. Hindi a few months before the election or even during the campaign period. Kasi questions like whether or not we should postpone the elections, these are conversations that must not be done in the first place. Kasi as Director Jimenez would say, would be expected to say, it's enshrined in the Constitution. So anything that would postpone substantially yung date ng election would be tantamount to a violation of the Constitution. Anyway, I defer to the lawyers for a more comprehensive legal opinion on that matter. So sa usapin ng survey, ulitin natin Melo yung usapin ng preference halimbawa for presidential candidates, I mean these are valid questions. Kaya lang depende pa rin yan sa timing Kung ngayon natin ginagawa yung mga ganyang survey, with all due respect to some of the survey firms out there, you are prone to being accused of mind conditioning. Tapos yung approval ratings din ng ilang mga cabinet members, pag yung context ng pagsasagawa ng survey ay hindi malinaw na ipapaliwanag, lalo na yung pangkabuoang kultura sa konteksto ng ayuda na natatanggap ng pamahalaan. So these are interrelated variables with regard to perceptions of people. So dapat maipaliwanag ito ng mabuti. So may malaking pananagutan yung mga survey firms without infringing on their survey freedom. May malaking pananagutan sila kapag hindi na ipapaliwanag, hindi lang yung metodolohiya ng survey, kundi pati na rin yung konteksto ng pagsasagawa nito.
Yeah. Eric, let me ask you, binanggit kasi yung voters education. Paano magagawa, let's say, ng grupo ninyo, yung voters education? Do you have access to the media? Do you have programs to push for voters education? Which will be attractive to the youth na yun ang bulk ng botante natin?
Okay, now voters education is done differently. Most of them, given already what we're going through right now, have shifted to online voters education, and most of them also have been accessible using the existing social media mediums.
Platforms, yeah.
Yeah. Even I've seen some voters education using TikTok. I've seen, of course, you see YouTube, being the most popular choice for voters education. But besides this, we've been pushing even way back, for making sure that it doesn't, as Danny pointed out, why should we discuss only the rights of voters, the importance of elections, and voters education only as we approach the elections? It should be a 24/7 concern. That's why we consider to Namfredo, we consider education as a citizenship education. What is the role of a respective Filipino to society? And we were convincing people in the legislature to institutionalize it. I think a couple of years ago, almost more than a decade ago, the current Parañaque mayor introduced legislation to even include it in the modules of DepEd, but it didn't fly. Hindi umabot ng second reading until there was no sponsor.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it could have been a very good initiative to make sure that all of these discussions that we're having with regards to citizens' rights, with regards to the importance of elections, with regards to the importance of of criteria for choosing a leader, would be discussed as early, especially targeted towards first-time voters, youth, the youth voters. So they're around 48 or 50%. They comprise 48 or 50% of our voting population. So, but patuloy pa rin tayo. That's why we're nakikisabay tayo doon sa kung saan yung kabataan ngayon ang nandun sila, no? Karamihan yan, online yan. So gumagamit na rin tayo ng mga iba-ibang platforms, no?
Yeah.
At maikli, no? Kuminsan 15 seconds or less. Paano mo
Buka na.
gagawin yung
Oo.
paano mo gagawin yung voters education mo, no?
Mhm.
But it's not an end all and be all, no? Alam naman natin, kuminsan nga mas mabuti pa yung para tayong goldfish yung attention span natin parang goldfish, no? 8-9 seconds lang. So ilalatch on mo lang yung mga kabataan na yan. Once you get a hold of their interest, then hopefully it's already a way for us to convince them to go to a YouTube video na medyo mahaba-haba. Then you can talk to them already. Then meron mga online discussions na ako nakikita, online communities, no? Using discourse or even I think COMELEC has that's a very good initiative that COMELEC has done. Every Saturday night, no, 9 o'clock, they have a radio program, no? So doon maraming initiatives, no, na nangyayari. Kasi if we will go to the traditional media, again, we're competing with those who have resources. Siyempre, ang mananaig dyan kung sino yung may airtime, kung sino yung may resources.
Pero Eric, let me point this out. The freedom of expression in the media depends on the elbow room provided by network owners and publishers.
Correct. That's
Okay,
true.
kung yung may-ari politiko, goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
That's why that's also a concern when we go to the provinces kung humihingi kami ng konting airtime sa mga cable televisions, and we know that most of the local cable televisions are owned by the local politicos also.
Yeah.
So
okay. Maganda binanggit mo, pero I don't know how COMELEC is responding to the need for voters education. Director James?
Well, I have a TikTok account and
pero hindi ka sumasayaw.
Hindi naman.
Hindi ka sumasayaw.
I am going to preserve what little shred of dignity I have left, no?
Okay, good. Congratulations.
But we do use new media. So that includes TikTok. We're talking about Facebook and Twitter, obviously. And katulad nga na nabanggit ni Sir Eric, meron kaming Radyo COMELEC every Saturday, no? It's not exactly a radio show. It's called Radyo COMELEC because it was born on radio, but it's now a webcast. So yun ang isa sa mga ginagawa namin ngayon. But we also have plans to roll out virtual seminars, no? Before the pandemic kasi meron kaming No Elections Better seminar. And we've taken it online, no? Only it's taken this long to actually nail down the actual platform that we could use, kasi medyo mahirap yung free na Zoom, no? Bitin, you have to log off after 30 minutes and then
40 naman.
40. So problema na medyo nawawala yung interest nung mga viewers mo. So but now that we have it, we're rolling out a series of online webinars for free for people to attend, and it will be a regular weekly webinar, no?
Good.
So that hindi lang siya, kasi Radyo COMELEC is more like a magazine program. So while we're able to do some voter education there, it's not the hardcore voter education that explains to people why they should vote, etc.
Okay. May nagtatanong nga, Director James, ano raw yung pangalan nyo sa TikTok?
I am Jab Jimenez. I am JAB Jimenez. That's
okay.
The one.
Good. All right.
Okay. Again, I don't dance, ha?
Okay.
I don't dance. So manage your expectations.
All right.
Yun.
Pero kumusta ang response doon sa approach ninyo?
Maganda naman.
Viewers.
Well, it's promising. For instance, on TikTok, it took a while for people to actually notice what we were doing on TikTok. Kasi syempre, on TikTok, I guess what's premium there is if you're funny or if you're dancing and all of that, no? And we're using TikTok in a different way, obviously. So we've had to, I guess, find a way to grab their attention. But I think once we do get people's attention, dumarating na yung mga followers. Dumarating na yung followers. And then dumarating na rin yung nag-share. And that's what Eric was talking about earlier. The game really how to catch the attention of the people. And then
Okay.
to drive them to resources that will give them more information.
Okay. May binanggit si Eric. Ito may kinalaman dun sa paglilipat ng mga mamamayan. At ito'y tanong din na nakarating sa akin kagabi. Paano yung mga OFWs na na-repatriate at nakauwi na sa probinsya, sa kanilang mga lugar? Paano yung mga nagbalik probinsya na dahil wala ng trabaho sa Metro Manila? Are they considered new voters? Dahilan sa baka ito magamit nung mga dating tinitirhan nung mga botante. Like for example, dito sa Maynila, baka may umuwi na sa probinsya for good, pero may boboto pa rin para sa kanila.
Kailangan po nilang gawin ay magpa-transfer of registration. They're not considered new voters. No? So even if you're coming from abroad and you have to register in the Philippines now because for some reason or another, you don't expect to be able to go back abroad anymore. No? Yung sinasabi nilang umuwi na for good. You're going to have to transfer your registration from the overseas voting system to the local registry. Ganun din if you're like in Manila, if you were in Manila before the pandemic and then the pandemic happened, binalik ka sa Ilocos Sur, then you have to register in Ilocos Sur, but not as a new voter, but as a transferee, which means that your records will be taken from wherever they were and essentially transmitted to to wherever you're transferring. No, again, we use this imagery of transferring files because it's what people are familiar with, but there's no actual physical transfer of files going on kasi naka-database naman tayo lahat, no? So basically sasabihin lang na wala ka na doon sa pinanggalingan mo at nandito ka na sa pinaglipatan mo.
Okay.
So not as a new registrant but as a transferee.
Okay. Merong isa pang concern dito. Well, I saw footages in Uganda dun sa eleksyon. Yung ballot boxes plastic lang. Tapos
Yes.
meron lang nakatali na plastic din. Ihuhulog
Yes.
yung balota. Pagkatapos babasahin yung boto na may check lang. Dahilan sa mukha ng kandidato ang nakalagay. Can we not do it in the Philippines for transparency's sake?
Nako, Sir Melo, kung maglalagay ka pa ng one by one na picture sa balota natin, ang balota natin ganyan nakahaba.
Ganon.
Kasi ang balota natin sa ngayon is already about this long. Pahiga. And that's just text. No? Imagine kung may one by one picture pa yan, hahaba na yan. Dahil synchronized elections po tayo.
Okay.
What you saw in Uganda was a parliamentary election or some sort of
Presidential din
presidential election, but presidential election lang, no? Perhaps may kasamang ibang local. I just recently came from Kazakhstan to witness the parliamentary elections there. Doon party list system sila, pero 4 lang na partido ang naglalaban-laban. So ganun din, i-check mo lang yung pangalan ng party list, may picture nung logo ng party list, no? So ang main determinant dito is how many are actually contesting the election. So in places like Kenya or Kazakhstan, like I said, because it's a relatively small election and you have a relatively small number of participants in the electoral contest, then kayang gawin yun. Napag-usapan na rin po, matagal na po yung idea na lagyan ng litrato, especially helpful yan para sa mga illiterate. Pero kasi yung pagkakadesenyo ng election system natin, yung synchronized, tapos ang dami-dami natin yung pagbubutuhan, 34 positions actually on the ballot. And you're talking about multiple candidates per position, like for president, di ba last time, We had like 5 candidates for president. For senator, we had 50. So so ganun pa lang kakonti. Mahaba na yung balota natin.
Okay.
So medyo hindi doable.
Saka mukhang hindi rin doable sa Pilipinas yon dahilan sa ang ilalagay na picture ng mga kandidato. Yung mga picture nila nung high school
Kabataan.
graduation.
Yan. Oo.
Hindi tumatanda eh.
Yung mga may buhok pa, boss.
Yeah. Hindi ba yun pandaraya na? Dahilan sa hindi naman yung itsura nila eh. So, kung sa advertising, merong truth in advertising, ito, dishonesty. So, how will you elect someone who's already dishonest in the pictures na nilalabas pa lang doon sa material? No?
Kahit nga
Yung tanong na yan, Carmelo. Delikado yung tanong na yan. Maraming makukulong.
Okay. Attorney Ona, a lawyer that you are, hindi ba dishonesty yun?
Well, parang dishonesty in advertising, sir. Pero wala naman pong ganong election offense. Ano na lang talaga yan eh. Nasa tao na lang talaga, sir. Pero yung naisip ko kanina, yung nung pinag-uusapan niyo po ni Director James yung pictures, can we consider it for national positions only, Director James? Kasi for local positions, kilala naman yan ng mga tao eh. Kasi tumatakbo naman yan sa lugar nila eh. But for national positions, possible kaya yun, Director James?
I think for a certain level of kunyari, for president siguro. Pero kasi once you get to the senatorial races, again, 50
na.
Oo, ang dami yan. Puno na kagad yung isang side ng balota mo. And if you remember, the last election we had, may issue pa tungkol doon sa placement ng party list. Bakit nilagay sa likod? No? Apparently, people don't know enough to flip the ballot. If you were to put pictures pa, even of the senators, I think for president, it might be doable. No? Considering that we've mostly been able to keep the number of candidates down to below 10. Baka doable. But also want to consider how big the pictures are going to be. Because if the pictures are too small naman, then people are going to complain. Parang what's the point, right? So it'll have to be a useful size also.
Okay. Paano yun? May voter's ID ka na, meron pang national ID. Hindi ba pwedeng ma-incorporate na lang sa national ID pati yung pagboto natin?
Ay, Sir Melo, wala na pong voter's ID.
Wala na.
Wala na. And that's precisely because we hope na magkaroon ng national ID. Again, para hindi naman masayang yung observation mission ko sa Kazakhstan, panggiting ko lang na napakatulin ng voting sa Kazakhstan because they had the national ID. A person would take about 3 minutes to complete the process from self-identification to the election officer all the way up to casting the ballot. All they need to do is they need to show the national ID, right? And then the election commissioner, that's what they call them, yung BEI nila doon, just checks the ID against a list of voters in that area. Having a national ID makes it possible for them to have precincts as large as 2,500 voters each. Average size na yun sa isang polling place, 2,500. So ang luwag-luwag ng mga areas nila kasi ang lalaki ng mga venue. And it's all facilitated because of a national ID system.
Will the COVID-19 not cause long queues? May social distancing ka pa? How did they do it in Kazakhstan?
What they did, sir, was that they had a very long election day. They started voting at 7 in the morning and ended at around 8 in the evening. They had, sa atin kasi, when you go to the polling place, isang tao lang ang nagbibigay ng balota sa iyo. You just have that one BI and the one chairman being authorized to give you the ballot. Sa kanila, in every polling place where you have, again, like I said, more than 2,000 people per polling place, no, they have up to 11 election commissioners. Ito yung BEI. And every single one of them are able to distribute ballots. And the reason they're able to make that work is because each person, each election commissioner is tasked to handle only a certain range of people. So it's A to D, for instance, and E to H. So ganyan. So ang dating ng tao, very orderly, and they're able to go directly to the election commissioner, who is assigned to their initial, and they're able to maintain social distancing that way. Again, because
Yes? Oops. What happened? Sandali po mga kaibigan. Nagka-problema po yata yung internet natin. Aha. One more time. Director?
yes, sir.
Ona? Yeah, Ona?
Yeah,
Yeah. Director James? Yes, please.
nawala ako. Nawala ako, sir.
Okay lang. Okay, pakituloy lang po. Sige po. You were saying something?
Ayun. So very efficient yung kanilang turnover, and kahit doon yung ballot box nila is actually just a clear acrylic box, and they seal it only with a zip tie and a paper seal. So medyo iba po ang Philippine elections kasi yung ballot box natin parang tangke de guerra.
Yun na nga eh. Pero
Yun lang, sir.
James, one more question for you before I go to our other panelists. Doon ba sa Kazakhstan may barangay captain? Have you heard?
Wala po. Wala silang ganung klaseng subunit, no? Meron silang parang wards lang, but they don't rely on individuals kasi nga meron po silang ID. So yung ID talaga ang nagiging parang ward leader nila dyan.
Okay, kaya ko kasi naitanong dahilan sa yung pagkakaroon ng barangay chairman sa matgaling eh. Yung kasing barangay chairman pwedeng hawak ng politiko, although dapat apolitical sila.
That's right.
Pero, sila rin yung naghahakot ng botante in some instances, no? Let's call a spade a spade. Attorney Ona, experience ninyo.
Totoo po yan, ang mobilizer sa baba sa mga barangay ay mga barangay officials. Kahit election offense yan, bawal ka. Alam mo yung mag-shepherd, mag-transport ng mga voters to the polling places. Bawal siya na makina. Pero nangyayari po talaga yan kasi wala napaparusahan. Yung isa po siguro yung problema natin also in our elections. Impunity. Yung mga hindi takot gumawa ng krimen kasi hindi nakakalusot.
Aha. Danny, from Contra Daya's point of view?
Yeah, we would confirm that kasi on the ground, marami naman talagang forma ng pandaraya. Hindi naman porke nagkaroon tayo ng automated elections, nawala na yung traditional na guns, guns and gold. As Attorney Carito said, hindi naman mahirap lahatin pero may mga barangay officials talaga na nagagamit ng mga politiko. That's why and even at the SK level, I'm sorry to say this, kahit yung sa Sangguniang Kabataan, namomobilize din towards serving certain political agenda. Yun yung problema rin kasi hindi masyadong na-monitor ng mabuti yung ganitong klaseng pandaraya, kaya hindi talaga napaparusahan. At patuloy pa rin yung mga ganitong klaseng forma ng mga katiwalian sa panahon ng eleksyon.
Eric? Yes, please.
Yeah, that's true, no? We concur with those observations, no? Dahil yun na nga, itong problema na to, hindi naman yung penalty, yung laki ng penalty ang pinapataw ang nakaka-deter, no? Yung certainty na nahuhuli ka at paparusahan ka, no? In any crime, no, or in any offense. Yun yung malaking bagay dito Hindi yung taas tayo ng taas ng penalty, no? So, kesa yung amount o kaya yung tagal, pero wala naman nahuhuli o kaya nahuhuli, hindi naman pinapatawan ng parusa. So syempre, we see this climate of impunity, no? Not only happening in election-related matters, but in other matters, no? Mabalik ako dun sa voters registration, no? That's the direction that we're headed right now. Hopefully, we see that this is a massive program, no? This is a massive campaign, yung national ID or national registry natin. And this is probably a solution and hopefully not a source of problem in the future, no? Because we want to make voting, no, inclusive, no? We want to provide each and every citizen, no, a right to participate and choose, no, their leaders, no, and determine, no, their future. Maganda itong ID na to dahil instead na yung ngayon na nangyayari na active voter registration, na yung kusang loob yung mamamayan ang lalapit para magparehistro, ito yung estado na, no, yung state na ang mag-extract sa database, no. Pero ang ganitong klaseng programa, biro mo 110 million Filipinos, paano mo i-roll out ito? Kaya mo ba in 3 years, in 5 years, no? Definitely not this 2022 elections, no? Siguro sa 2025, that's already a pipe dream, no? Pero kakayanin natin. But siguro 80 million, 70 or 80 million registered voters, siguro kayang ma-extract ito. And ito, mapapadali pa yung no, hindi na magiging problema. At pangalawa, magiging ano rin, paraan din, no, na you will assure each and every individual wherever he or she is that he can exercise the right to vote, no. Ang problema lang naman dito ngayon na nakikita ko, kasi I mentioned, no, na this could be a possible solution, no, to all of the problems related to registration and even cleansing the database, no, of our vote and making it updated, no. Ang problema naman dito, baka hindi rin maging malinis, no, yung baka maging pamamaraan naman ito to provide access to services.
Okay.
Kung ID, o kaya kung may ID ka, may preferential option ka, no, to services. Right now, even the access, for instance, no, in the future, in the next few months, no, to vaccines, no, is already a concern for some of the people, no. Parang baka magamit itong tool if you can have access to the vaccines. So, ngayon, ang national ID, nakikita rin baka pamamaraan ito na to provide preference, no, to those individuals who can have access to basic services, no.
Okay.
So ito rin ang nakikita natin na we have to really study yet, no, before it crops up.
Quick rejoinder lang, Melo. Okay,
Yes,
lang,
please.
on the national ID system.
Yes, yes.
Kasi maganda naman yung it's definitely a national ID system would be an attractive idea to hasten the process of voting and or even of registration. Kaya lang, if we would recall, there had been opposition to the national ID system in the past, not only because of privacy issues, but because of certain possibilities of persecution. And in the context of red tagging right now, even among some of the party list groups elected in Congress, parang there is that sort of that proverbial sword of Damocles hanging over our heads na kapag ka naipatupad ang isang national ID system, baka ito yung maging weapon. It can be further weaponized for the crackdown. So on one hand, ang national ID system, it can result in mo yung tamang impormasyon. Kaya lang in the hands of an oppressive regime that would engage in a crackdown of legitimate dissent, parang nandun yung worry about a national ID system. So, buti ito kasi mahirap na ma-weaponize ang isang national ID system, especially now na dapat yung isang concern din natin yung red tagging. And I think during the campaign and even now, nangyayari na yung red tagging and it would further intensify during the campaign period months before the 2022 elections.
Professor, let me ask you this. Do you think yung anti-terror law at yung red tagging na nagaganap will in a way stifle a free discussion of issues? Because with this law, some people are thinking that if you go against certain policies of the establishment, you can easily be classified into delawan or pulahan. Ganun ba yon?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Kasi going back to the anti-terror law, that's why there are at least 37 petitions lodged before the Supreme Court opposing that particular law. Among other issues would be the broadness of the definition of terrorism. So yun na nga, yung legitimate dissent could be misinterpreted as an act of terrorism. Even in media, na nagiging malaking issue rin yan sa amin dahil sa baka mamaya pag nag-interview ka ng isang tao na suspected of being a terrorist, parang magkaroon ka ng ng culpability. And actually, we have to remember, even before the enactment of the anti-terror law, even simple posts on Facebook would result in invitations from certain local government officials or even the NBI. So parang nandun na yung chilling effect eh. So that's why part of our voter education process, and I hope this would also be considered by our friends from the COMELEC, it should include yung yung assertion then of our right to suffrage, wherein we should not let anything or anyone stifle legitimate dissent, including anything that would affect our right to suffrage.
Yeah. Professor, parang nabanggit mo yung suffrage, no? Kaya lang pag bumagal yung internet, baka maging suffrage.
Suffering.
People will be bound to suffer. Attorney Ona, your views, please.
Ako I join Professor Arrow's concern, especially yung sa anti-terror law po at yung sa red tagging, because it has been happening for the past few years, and lalo na po election is a very political process. It can really be used to stifle dissent, genuine dissent. So kailangan po talaga nating bantayan yan. And hopefully, COMELEC will take a more proactive role in issuing out statements about that, yung sa pagre-red tag. Kasi that could be used during the campaign. Possible na concern or possible na issue ng mga candidate. And that would be, that would affect their right to campaign freely. So, sana po yan ay tignan din ng COMELEC at bantayan. Kasi that will really happen, especially during the campaign period.
So, Attorney Ona, kung magpapatuloy yung trend, what we may have will be a company union, ganon?
Sana naman po hindi magpapatuloy yan trend, because I always believe that people are more proactive in exercising their right, especially Filipinos, in exercising their right to suffrage. So sana po mas maraming tao, yung mga elam at mas maraming organization ang mas tumingin sa election ngayon pa lang. Kasi what the problem in our elections is tumitingin lang tayo 6 months before or during the filing of COC. Tulad nga po ng sabi nila Sir Eric at ni Prof. Danny earlier, it should be it should be proactive citizenship. It should not be citizenship 6 months before the date of the actual election.
Yeah, Eric from NAMFEL, do you share the same view?
Yes, as I mentioned, it could be misused. The access or the provision for a national ID system could be misused by the state. And we just have to be vigilant at that. While true, it could provide services right now. In the advent of what's going on in social media, it could be another means towards amplifying certain propaganda. It could be used also to attach you to a particular group, which imbis na makaprovide ng access tayo for those services or your rights, it could even deny you of those rights. Or worse, it could be used by you being associated with a particular group. At madali kang, meron tayong national security law na tinatawag. So, that's a very big concern for us, especially right now that the space for Danny pointed out very clearly, yung legitimate dissent is narrowing. Lumiliit yung espasyo natin. So it's going to be, it could be abused. And this is precisely why citizens have to take part, not only in the preparations but in the rollout and even in policing, yung self-regulating sana, the use of that information that is provided by the citizens to the state. Hanggang kailan mo pwedeng gamitin yung informasyon na yun?
kailan mo gagamitin. Kasi kung gagamitin niya against you, teka muna, no? Labag yan sa karapatan din natin.
Mhm. Director James? Director James?
Tama, sir. I share everyone's apprehensions about the national ID. No, in fact, when I was working with the Solicitor General before, isa yan sa mga positions namin was that we would have to go very slowly into the idea of a national ID because there were a lot of privacy issues that needed to be solved or at least settled before we even tried to do a national ID. However, I think that would be the work of appropriate agencies, not the COMELEC per se. And from the point of view of the COMELEC, I have to say that it would be very useful. However, kami sa COMELEC, we are wary of using an ID as a sort of keystone for registration, for voting. Precisely the reason why even when we had voter IDs, hindi namin ginagamit yan as a requisite for voting. At most, it will be a means of facilitating identification, but not as a condition sine qua non in order to vote. No?
Yeah.
Bawal po yan. At least as far as the democratic theory prevailing right now goes. In fact, kung matatandaan ninyo, that one of the things na nakita was bags and bags of voter IDs na nakatago sa basement ng warlord na yon. That is proof positive na ginagamit yung ID as a means of controlling voters. And that's not something that we're good with. No? Again, as I said, if there is a national ID, then as far as the COMELEC is concerned, it will only be for facilitating identification. There will be other IDs that are necessary or that are acceptable, and certainly the national ID will not be a condition sine qua non for voting.
Yeah. Director, will COMELEC have an exclusive access to indelible ink? Because what I heard, there are political warlords who use indelible ink to prevent the other side from voting. Pero in exchange may bayad. Halika rito, lagyan kita ng Q-Tex. So, yun ang kaya nananalo yung kandidato kahit walang katorya-torya, so to speak, no?
Ang problema natin sa indelible ink, Sir Melo, is although the ink that we use is of a specific formulation, meron siyang specific silver nitrate content, no? You can actually fake the appearance of indelible ink. Alam mo yung tinta na ginagamit sa stamp? If you apply it to a finger, it will pass cursory examination. So, I mean, even if we did have exclusive rights to a very specific kind of indelible ink, if you could fake it with ordinary stamp pad ink, then parang useless yung pagiging exclusive ng formulation na yon. Kasi nga, na-fake naman. Wala namang means on the ground to determine kung original ba yon or kung authentic ba yung ink na nasa daliri ng tao. Wala din tayong procedure sa COMELEC na pag present yung finger for examination, lilinisin muna. I mean, that would have been a way to do it, no? Kasi kung indelible ink yan, obviously hindi matatanggal. Pero kung fake ink yan, then if you were to wipe it off with acetone, baka matanggal nga, no? So that would have been a way to do it. Pero wala sa procedure natin yan.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Very creative ang Pilipino eh. Anyway. Magaling. We have a question from our colleague from the media, one of the best anchors of ABS-CBN, Johnson Manabat. Johnson, good morning.
Sir Melo, good morning.
Morning.
Kay Sir James Jimenez. Sir James,
Yo,
pwede na
Johnson.
ba kayo mag-sample ng TikTok?
Ha!
That's a joke.
TikTok ako. I have 13,000 views,
Wow.
man. I mean, hello.
Sir, ang concern ko po, yun hong sa, kasi may roll out na po ng registration for the national ID at ito po na may isa ng batas. In case so merong specific information na kailangan si COMELEC na maisama sa national ID para mas makatulong po sa mas mabilis na proseso ng eleksyon, ano po kaya yun? Although ang sabi nyo, ang national ID is for identification lang naman. kung sakasakaling gagamitin?
Sa ngayon wala kaming participation diyan sa consortium na yan except as a registration point, no? I believe the plans call for COMELEC officers to be transformed into registration points for the national ID. But even then, ang gagamitin lang sa amin ay yung physical premises namin. The machines that will be used will be provided by the national ID system. The software that will be used will be provided by the national ID system. And in fact, the training of the operators of the machines will be provided by the national ID system. So as far as the national ID system is concerned, ang COMELEC ay isang collection point lamang. Hindi kami kasama dun sa pagbubuo ng ID mismo. Kaya nga, sa national ID na yan, wala kang makikita sa ngayon sa disenyo ngayon, wala kang makikitang voter-specific information. No? Ang voter ID kasi ties you to a geographic location as a registered voter of that area. The national ID will do no such thing. The national ID will simply identify you as a Filipino citizen and give the address of record. Okay? Now, whether or not that address of record will be connected to the database of COMELEC, medyo pag-uusapan pa lang yan. Wala pa yan ngayon doon sa disenyo ng national ID system.
Alright. Thank you, Sir James. Doon po sa ibang panelists naman, pwede lang makakuha ng categorical answer doon sa inyong position sa nagpapatuloy ng registration para sa isang national ID. Either Danilo or...
Ako, mauna na ako, Sir Melo. Kasi nakalagay naman sa national ID law natin na the database could be used for voter registration database. So nakaabang na talaga yan. Ang kailangan lang talaga gawin i-tweak yung data na meron sa national ID law so that it could be used for voter registration. Ito nga yung sinasabi ni Sir Eric na passive voter registration. At kailangan gawan ng rules yan. Kailangan gawan ng policy. Kaya hopefully that could be used in future elections for the purpose of future elections.
For Contra Daya, we are more worried about the possible weaponization of the national ID system. As Director Jimenez correctly mentioned, there are other ways by which voters can be identified to ensure in a particular precinct and that the person doing the registration would be really the person who will be actually voting. So there are certain safeguards to that effect, and right now, it would rather be better for the country and for the people to oppose any means to have a national ID system for the simple reason that we are under a regime of tyranny and impunity, and legitimate dissent is being stifled every now and then, even before the passage of the anti-terror law. So for Contra Daya, it's our position to oppose anything that can be weaponized and that can be compromised in terms of exercising the people's right to suffrage. Yun lang po. Salamat.
Yeah. Eric?
Yes, definitely there are advantages towards the adoption of the national ID system. We just have to weigh, if the benefits, for migrating towards the national ID system far outweigh the threats or disadvantages that we would encounter in the future. But knowing and identifying these possible problems is already a step towards making sure that the national ID system would not be misused. I, for one, would still believe that it could be beneficial towards not only encouraging a lot of our voters to register, but it could also be utilized by the Commission to manage and make accurate our voters registry. As I mentioned, oras pa lang na pinanganak ka, ibig sabihin assured ka na botante ka na pagdating mo ng 18 years old. So ito yung kagandahan na to, na hindi kahit saan ka, 18 years old ka, pwede ka nang bumoto. So it's just probably a means towards managing our and sharing the database. No?
Okay, Director James, I got some questions for you from California.
Wow.
May
Yes, sir.
tanong dito, siguro gawa nung nangyari sa Amerika, nabanggit kasi ni Pangulong Trump na nadaya siya. Ang tanong mula sa California ay, gagamitin ba yung Smartmatic sa eleksyon natin?
Yung makina po na ginagamit natin ay binili natin from Smartmatic. So, to the extent that the devices that we're using are Smartmatic branded, may tatak na Smartmatic doon sa makina, then yes, gagamitin natin yung Smartmatic. But in terms of the software, the canvassing system, ganyan, lahat po yan homegrown na. No? Sa atin na yan, gawa na ng long experience natin sa automation. If at all, ang Smartmatic will be vendor support lang kasi nga sa kanila natin binili yung makina. But hindi yung idea ng mga tao na Smartmatic ang nagpapatakbo ng halalan, hindi po totoo yun.
Okay. Yung pong sistema natin sa komunikasyon, sapagkat medyo nakakahiya mang sabihin, yung ating internet, Kuya Cesar at daily mode pa rin. Ano? Napakabagal. May satellite daw ba kayong inarkila para batuhan lang ng batuhan ng results?
Pangkaraniwan po na kapag tayo ay nag-arrange ng ating electronic transmission system, talagang nagre-renta tayo ng tinatawag nating BGAN, or Broadband Global Area Network. Gumagamit po ito ng mga maliliit na satellite na nagpapatalbog ng signal sa atmosphere. Pero ito'y ginagamit doon sa mga lugar na walang telco coverage, no? Or mahirap yung telco coverage. So hindi yan gagamitin for the entire country, but only for those areas where transmission is problematic. For the most part, maganda naman yung transmission natin. Katulad ng nakaraang halalan, umabot na tayo ng mahigit 96%, no? Within the first 12 hours. So nag-i-improve naman, but there are still some problem areas. I mean, kahit nga ngayon in the middle of Metro Manila, bigla ka mawawalan ng signal. It happens. No? So for problem areas, we're going to use BGANs po. And then to some extent, yung tatawag na VSAT. Very small aperture signals.
Yeah. There will always be that possibility na mangyari yung sinabi ni Forrest Gump. Blank happens, no?
Yes. Let's happen. Yes, sir.
Hindi ko nababanggitin kung ano yung term na yun. But anyway, let's look forward. Eric, anong aasahan ng tao sa NAMFREL sa mga susunod na panahon? Will you also be using TikTok? Will I get to see you on TikTok or Bigo para magparating ng mensahe sa ating mga kabataan?
More than anything, of course, there are a lot of groups already getting into voters education or citizenship education. We'd like to act as a resource for that. No, hindi na masyado kami magproduce na kasi marami na masyado. No, but from time to time, it would be at the very least instructional, at the very most, trying to enhance the debate with regards to the options available and the choosing of the candidates. No, and most important, no, why elections really is should happen. No, this is a non-negotiable for us. No? It is a right that should not be denied of any citizen. So that is the major point that we'd like to put forth, especially as James mentioned. Yes, mga taong yung mga decision makers natin dyan no, sa Kamara. Please do not trifle with elections, no? Because the consequences are very dire, no? If you do that. Yeah. No?
What do you have to say? What do you have to say about candidates na ang mentality sarap ng buhay? Ganun lang, wala lang. Sarap buhay.
Sarap buhay, pero
hirap naman ang bayan, no?
Oo, hirap ang bayan, pero wag nating paabutin yung panahon, no, na yung nakikita nga na hirap na yung bayan at umabot na at mapuno na yung salop ang sinasabi nila, no? Mapuno na yung pasyensya ng taong bayan. That's precisely why we're running elections, no? To make sure, no, that the social fabric is intact. No? There's a way to redress all of those grievances, no? By the people. Right now, we've seen in the past month, di ba, nung yung initial pandemic response, galit na galit yung tao, and yung taong bayan mismo nagsasabi, kailan ba yung election? No? Pwede ba ngayon na nga yung election? No? Of course, na-diffuse yung concern na yun at yung galit na yun, but we have to ramp up that concern, no, of the citizens na importante yung eleksyon at hindi lang dapat ipabayaan o isa walang bahala ang eleksyon, no? Dahil ang consequences nito nakita naman natin, no? Hindi lang yung buhay natin, no? Pati yung kung saan patungo na yung ating bansa, no? Lagi na lang tayong naiiwan, no? So
will NAMFREL commission probably another group to take a closer look at the party list that we have today? Dahilan sa kahit sino na lang pwede nang mag-party list eh. Don't you think NAMFREL should commission a group to study this?
We've been participating in that's the irony. We've been participating, and most of us here have been participating in discussions and even recommendations for legislation to improve and strengthen not only the political party system, but even making sure that the ills towards implementation of the party list system are redressed, no? But yung nga sila mismo ang nagde-decide ng batas na yan, sila rin ang nakikinabang.
Precisely. Kaya walang mangyayari sa mga suggestions.
Walang mangyayari. And now we look towards the commission, no? Because the commission right now has the power, has the authority to really either disqualify certain party lists that are really just fronts for political dynasties. Yung sinasabi sa Senado na mayroon pa raw mga kailangan legislature, dito pa lang sa administrative level pwede nang gawin ng COMELEC yan mayroon ng poder at may power ng COMELEC to decide on sino ba yung legitimate yung concern ng ni Danny kanina, baka ma-amplify yan as we move towards the elections. Kasi ngayon nakikita natin there are certain party list groups that are being targeted. If COMELEC is really independent, it will really enforce what should be in a party list. And I think they're doing that, and they should not be influenced by external forces that would make them decide eitherwise na itong party list na to dapat tanggalin o dapat i-disqualify because may pressure and we're behind COMELEC always that they will make the right decisions and they will
don't you think, Eric, the term should be we are shoulder to shoulder with COMELEC? Dahil pag we are behind COMELEC, mababaril yung taga COMELEC, kayo hindi.
Pero ngayon ang pinapanggamit armor piercing. So tinatamaan din kami. Tagus-tagusan Una lang matatamaan sila.
Okay. All right. Danny, your thoughts please. Before we go back to Ona and to our good friend Director James. Yes.
Okay. Of course, sa bahagi ng Kontradaya, I think your question has to do with moving forward, what do we plan to do? Of course, we will still engage in voter education. Just for the record, behind the scenes, we work together with COMELEC, with Lente, and other election watchdogs on the ground because we try our best to reach out to as many people as possible. So we do that. Second, our policy research on party list groups would still continue. And our group has been at the forefront in terms of identifying or flagging party list groups that are being owned and controlled by political clans and big businesses. We're most especially concerned with charter change because one of the reasons being put forward by some policymakers is that that the constitution should be changed to abolish or to reform the party list law in such a way that would disqualify certain communist fronts. which is very much problematic because, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of reforms that need to be made with the party list law, but it doesn't mean that we will be changing the constitution. But the reform in the party list law would have to do with trying to make it as representative as possible to the marginalized and the underrepresented. So ganun dapat sana yung perspektiba, kaya lang ang nagiging kalakaran ngayon, parang ginagamit din yung party list law bilang extension ng red tagging campaign ng AFP, PNP at saka ng NTF-ELCAC. Now, as a last point, and I don't want to put Director Jimenez in an uncomfortable position because this is beyond his control, we are worried that by February 2022, all commissioners of the COMELEC will be 100% appointed by Duterte. Of course, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with it because it's the natural expiration of the terms of the COMELEC commissioners. Pero given the way in which certain commissioners have been appointed, yung iba iisang lugar lang yung pinanggagalingan. Again, nothing wrong with that dun sa lugar na pinanggagalingan. Kaya lang the independent-mindedness and the track record of certain commissioners would have to be, put into question. So that's why part of our commitment for Contra Daya would be to closely monitor, of course, all policies of the COMELEC because of the character and the complexion of the COMELEC commissioners by February 2022, because I refer specifically to the end of term of Commissioner Guanzon, who's the sole Aquino appointee at the moment. So again, I apologize to James if I put him in an awkward position, pero ganun talaga yung trust ng Contra Daya sa kasalukuyan, because that's how it's going to be by 2022.
Okay. Professor, nobody protested when the Israelites were called the chosen people and that Israel is the chosen land. No. It so happened Davao yung chosen land ngayon. So, okay lang. Provided they are capable of doing what is expected of them. No? So, yun nga, wala nagprotesta na yung mga Israelites are the chosen people and that Israel is the chosen land. Kaya lang, sabi ni Madeleine Albright, what if kumanan yung mga Israelites from Egypt? So, nandun sila ngayon sa Saudi Arabia, may langis doon. So, walang problema. Anyway, that's another issue. Attorney Ona, your thoughts, please.
Two thoughts po. In relation to the party list, what we're doing now is we're capacitating NGO CSOs who are interested to run as a party list group on the technicalities of it, on the procedural aspect of if you want to run or if your group wants to run for a party list position in the election. So we're doing that. Kasi if you can't beat them, join them. So kailangan talagang mag-capacitate or matuto ang mga organizations, especially those who have already communities and who are organized. Kung gusto mo baguhin, edi you run as a party list group. Yun po yung ginagawa namin sa party list front. And it has always been our position sa Lente po na sa framers po ng ating constitution, they really met the party list group, the party list system to be open to all groups who want to run and not make it exclusive to marginalized or underrepresented sectors. That's according to the framers of our constitution. Second, moving forward po, ang direction naman po lagi ng Lente is to make our elections more accountable, transparent, inclusive, so that people will be more confident about the elections. And we're looking closely in making sure that our rules, our laws in place is directed towards that end. Kaya importante po yung plebiscite sa Palawan. Kasi dyan po natin makikita yung pag-campaign, 50% lang yung pwede na magsama-sama in an assembly or in a meeting de avance. How would that affect our elections, our campaign in the national election? So importante po na makita yung plebiscite sa Palawan. And in Palawan, we will see yung reduced number of voters in the polling places kasi hindi pwedeng ganun karami yung regular po na number natin. How would that affect the preparation of COMELEC? How would that affect the number of electoral board members who be mobilized to act as poll workers? So yan po yung importanteng tignan natin this first quarter because that will really affect how the elections will be conducted more than a year from now. Less than 2 years.
Attorney Ona, isang tanong lang. What do you have to say about people using their photos with people in power. We saw this before the 2019 elections. May malalaking billboard sa Espanya with the president and now Senator Bongo. Is that not a way of circumventing election laws? Sabi kasi ng COMELEC, di pa naman nagpa-file ng certificate.
Unfortunately, that's our legal, that's our legal setting na you're not considered a candidate as long as hindi pa nagsa-start yung campaign period and you have filed your certificate of candidacy. So yung mga nakikita po natin billboards ngayon, it's more of people, of voters to take note of. Kasi yung mga billboards po na yan, may gastos yan, malaking pera yan. E saan po kinukuha ng mga taong to yung pambayad sa mga billboard na yan? So it's another issue. Katulad nga po na nabanggit ko kanina, campaign finance is a big issue in our election. People should take more notice of how candidates and political parties are getting their sources to spend in our elections.
Yeah. In Camarines Sur, yung mga Villafuerte, namimigay na ng
Yung
mga
mga mask.
shield, no? Magkakatabi pa yung mukha nila, no? So isn't that a way of circumventing election laws?
It's a way, pero ang nakakatuwa po dyan nung naglabas yung mga Villafuerte ng mga mask, ang daming lumabas sa epal naman ng mga ito. So dapat po ituloy lang natin, ituloy natin lahat yung pag-call out ng mga ganong kandidato or ganong mga politiko na ang epal nyo, hindi nyo naman pera yan ng taong bayan, and you're putting your faces and names on those materials.
No. What chances have other candidates got if you're fighting a well-oiled machinery like that of the Villafuertes, no? What chances have you?
Well, nakita naman po natin in the previous elections that as much as it will be an uphill battle, ito po ay malaking laban, pero small players or yung mga wala po masyadong pera could still win. Mayor Vico, Governor Kaka. So may mga si Congressman Lawford too. So may mga ano pa rin naman po tayo, shiny examples na kayang manalo. Basta po marunong mag-network, marunong mag-mobilize ng mga tao and communities.
Yeah, but Ona, you will also agree with me that they are more of the exceptions rather than the rule.
That's true. So we have to make it a rule and not an exception. At lagi po natin tatandaan, Sir Melo, kasi yung lagi po natin sinasabi to bumoto ng tama. Ang problema, wala na pong ibobotong tama ang mga tao kasi wala namang ibang tumatakbo. So kailangan rin po natin pag-isipan yung mga lalo na po yung mga leaders in their respective communities, in their local areas. Baka naman pag-isipan nyo tumakbo in the elections. Kasi katulad po na nabanggit ko kanina, the political families, the political dynasties, they're consolidating their power, they're expanding, nagpa-franchise na po sa mga katabing probinsya. And if we don't do something about it, yan na po yung magiging election natin. Parang it's just a prefactory exercise na wala, boboto natin kasi wala tayong ibang iboboto.
Last point. What do you have to say about the creation of so many districts to accommodate political parties or political personalities? Gerrymandering is the term.
It is a term. I would always depend on the resources that the government have and the requirements for you to form a district. So, I think kailangan po tignan yon, especially when districts are formed left and right. Kasi baka po hindi na kaya ng gobyerno natin, especially at the budget aspect of it. So, kailangan po tignan siguro yun.
Okay. All right. Maganda to eh. Director James, your thoughts about what's going on, what needs to be done? Some people say they will believe in the independence of the Commission on Elections if a commissioner by the name of James Jimenez gets appointed.
Long shot yan, sir. First of all, I would like to put Sir Danny at ease. Thank you very much for your concern about my discomfiture. We look forward to hearing the pronouncements of Contra Daya all the time because Contra Daya, Namfrel, Lente, they're the ones who really remind us of things that might get lost in the shuffle as we're preparing for the elections. Syempre, the COMELEC is focused on certain things, and it's always good to have reminders from groups like Contra Daya and Namfrel and Lente about the things we might be missing. Obviously, the concern is very real, about the commissioners being, the composition being what it is. However, um, we also hope that we would be able to give our commissioners a fair shake. No? And in many cases, our commissioners have proven themselves to be independent of the positions taken by the government at large. So I think we should just keep on, um, being, what's that made up Tagalog word, fiscalizers, of each other. So maraming salamat po for that. As far as the plebiscite goes, just like everyone here, kami sa COMELEC, we also consider the Palawan exercise as a mapping exercise. Essentially, we're mapping out what we are going to do in 2022. Nabanggit ni Attorney Ona, one of the things that we're going to see is the reduced number of voters per precinct. And already may impact na yan dun sa preparations natin kasi biglang dumami yung ating polling sets. No? Another thing that we're looking at is what are we going to do about people who are either positive for COVID on election day or are in quarantine, or you know how they check your temperature when you go to a place? What if your temperature is 37.8? Anong gagawin sa'yo? Are you going to be denied the right to vote just because mataas ang temperatura mo? So, protocols for handling situations like that are going to be field tested essentially in Palawan. We have procedures laid out already, and we will inform the public of them in due time. But for now, those are the areas that are really very important for us to sort of define, because they will impact our preparations for 2022. Yung Palawan 2, 3 na plebiscito natin, I think this is a very critical halfway point, no, as we march towards the 2022 elections. And we welcome all of the attention from everyone regarding this. And one of the things that we always say now is don't sit this one out. Napakahalaga na maging bahagi tayo nito mga darating na electoral exercises na ito.
Aha. May reaction si Andre Las. Sabi niya yung party list itself may be prone to abuse. But we know from the start that the original intent of the party list in the Constitution and the party list law, that it is for representing marginalized sectors. The applicants for accreditation in the COMELEC are mostly from political dynasties. Accreditation is a very crucial stage if we want to abbreviate this obvious maneuvering of the law. Short reaction, please.
Sir, actually, if you go back to the records, the idea of the party list system was actually to really open up the political system, no? Para hindi lang yung mga politiko, yung mga candidates na may funding ang pwedeng sumali. Several Supreme Court decisions sort of threw a spotlight on the marginalized and underrepresented, but the original intendment of the law, as I understand it, and as the Supreme Court held in a recent case, was really to allow more people to run and more groupings of people to run. Kaya nga, even political parties are actually allowed to participate in the party list system. Kaya nga lang, there was a time in our history na spotlight talaga yung marginalized and underrepresented. But even now, the marginalized and underrepresented are supposed to be part of the party list, pero hindi lang sila. I think that's the sticking point. Hindi po yun exclusive for the marginalized and underrepresented.
Okay. All right. Yung COVID-19, how will it impact on spending? Ano nakikita nyo, Director James? Dahilan sa kung meron kang limitadong constituents na makakaboto, hindi kaya limitado rin yung gastos mo dyan? Ano yung impact nun doon sa rent a crowd? Yung mga umaattend ng rally nakahakot-hakot. So wala silang ganung hanap buhay.
Ako, hindi maniniwala dyan, sir. Malaki ang impact ng COVID, no? Doon, That's not a COVID cough, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Uh,
Good.
So number one. Because we've had to reduce the number of people in each polling place, we have had to correspondingly increase the number of polling places. So na pala ang impact na yan. Why? Because you need more space, and then you need more BEIs. No? You need to essentially hire more people, not hire, but give honoraria to more teachers who will run more polling places. Hahaba ang voting day. And in one particular instance, very specific, meron kaming special precinct para sa mga PUI, persons under investigation. Now, when we start going into people who should be allowed to vote in quarantine, because remember, having a disease is not a disqualification for voting.
Precisely.
No? So kahit may COVID ka, hindi magandang dahilan 'yan para hindi ka makaboto. So we're studying means of extending the vote to people who are in quarantine. Again, no guarantees at this point, but we're definitely looking at that. But you can be sure na magkakaroon po ng ng cost implication 'yan. In other countries, what they do is they actually bring a sort of portable ballot box to the sick, no, to the hospitals, to the quarantine facilities, and then they outfit the election worker. So PPE yan for that election worker, transportation, hazard pay, and so on and so forth. So medyo malawak po ang impact ng COVID in terms of budget. Now, as far as people, yung tinatawag yung rent a crowd, the reason I'm saying na huwag kayong umasang mawawala is the kind of people who rent a crowd are also the kind of people who really don't care about other people. Diba? I mean, I am not going to, as you said earlier, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I mean, if you're the kind of person who tries to gin up the elections by hiring people to come into crowds, why would a disease stop you? Where would your moral scruples be in that situation? Malamang wala rin. So I would warn our public na huwag kayong umasa na aalagaan kayo ng mga handler na ganyan. Huwag kayong aasa na kayo ay may malasakit sa inyo, yung mga tao magsasabi sa inyo, pumunta kayo sa rally para mabayaran kayo.
Mhm.
Those people don't give jack shit about you. So, huwag kayong magpapadala sa ganyan.
Okay.
Sorry.
You know, Director, as I was setting my mind for this discussion, you know, I had this dream last night, kaya nagising ako ng maaga. And kaya ako nagising dahil nagpasa daw ng resolusyon ang COMELEC na lahat ng kandidato should deliver speeches at pagbawalang magbudot sa entablado para marinig ng tao kung ano yung kanilang mga panukala. Bawal ang sayaw, kundi dapat talumpati. Do you think it will ever happen, Director?
Na bawal ang sayaw, sir?
Bawal ang sayaw. Mahirap.
No, I don't think it will happen. Ngayon pa nga lang, ang dami na sumasayaw sa social media, sir.
Yun na nga eh.
Paano pa kayo?
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Short rejoinders from Ona and Dan and Eric. Attorney Ona, before we say thank you. Yes, please.
Nung Friday po, nagkaroon kami ng discussion with political parties or with representatives of political parties as to propose rules for elections during COVID. At isa sa mga na-raise nila is yung resolution ng COMELEC as to ano ba yung number of minutes per station ba yan o combined of all the stations. So kailangan po talaga na paghandaan yan ng COMELEC as early as now kasi makaka-apekto po talaga ang COVID in the way candidates, in the way political parties do their campaign and spend for their campaign. Kaya importante po na actually sinabihan rin po namin yung mga political parties, reach out to COMELEC, talk to COMELEC, raise to them your issues. Kasi kawawa rin naman po ang COMELEC. Ang dami rin naman nila iniisip. And if hindi i-raise sa mga political parties yung mga concerns na yan, hindi yan magiging part of the decision making for this resolution. So gusto ko lang po i-point out yun kasi malaki po talaga effect ng COVID in our elections. Our elections will not be the same elections that we had the past 3 presidential elections.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Attorney Ona. Professor Danny?
Yeah. The 2022 elections would be different in the sense that this is a pandemic election, but the age-old issues would still remain. We still have the guns, and gold. We still have various forms of fraud. So I think just to shorten this message, I would just like to quote from the tagline of Contradaya, maghanda, magbantay, kumilos, because these are the three actions the three values that we should be doing in line with the 2022 election. So vigilance is the key here. We don't just have to ensure that we will go out and vote. We would have to make sure that we guard our votes and that our votes are counted correctly and accurately. Maraming salamat po.
Yeah, thank you. Eric?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. If I may add, no, guns, gold, and gigabytes. No? Because right now the battle is in social media. No? And padamihan na lang ng access ng portal. But we have to be very careful about the information coming out from this new medium. True, no? We want to we seek change, no? We seek reforms, no? But if we ourselves do not make the first step, which is to go out there and register or at least make our records correct, if we have to transfer our registration, then all of these things will come to naught. No? For us citizens, it's upon us already. No? Even if you say na, okay, sige, bawal na yung sumayaw, no? Ano na lang tayo, magbigay na lang tayo ng speeches. But words are cheap, no? Ang pinaka-importante sa taong bayan pa rin, bantayan natin, no? I-monitor natin kung ano yung performance, yung actions ng ating mga leaders. Right now, there are various groups and initiatives being done by civil society, no? Yung magmo-monitor ng budget, no? Sa ibaba, no? Malaman natin kung totoo ba ang ginagastos to para sa social services or kung saan pumupunta. The pressure right now has been seen, no, in the prices of the vaccines, no. There's one very popular vaccine na ganun pala yung amount na binigay pero yung pala yung totoong presyo bumagsak na lang to 650. Pwede pa nga bumagsak yun. Again, no, this is because of the effort of the public, of media, no, by pointing it out na ito yung talagang totoong factual price, no. This is precisely why we've been encouraging people, no, to go out and participate in all of these citizens-led initiatives. No? On the part of COMELEC, may we request COMELEC to share information, pertinent information, which would help us be informed voters. No? As we move forward towards preparations for the 2022 elections, this information will help us also make good decisions, no, as we prepare, no, for the 2022 elections.
Yeah,
So thank you very much.
Yeah, Director, message for everyone?
Huwag kalimutan magparehistro para makaboto.
Okay.
Just register. I mean, yeah.
All right. Mahalaga yun. Mahalaga yung mensahe magparehistro para makaboto. You know, I'm reminded of a good friend, Mr. Joe Concepcion. Si Joe said something like, it is better to light a candle than stumble in the dark. Maybe COMELEC should find out from the Department of Energy if we have enough electricity come election campaign and election counting. So, okay yun. And then I'm also reminded of what Joe Con said. Yes, the Filipino can. So, ibig sabihin, kaya ng Pilipino at hindi papayag ang Pilipino na ilagay sa lata. No? There will always be this quest for freedom and for independence, right? So I'd like to thank everyone who took time out to be with us. Kasama rin natin si Dr. Tan Cho Chiong of Chinese General Hospital. He's monitoring our show. Sandro Chona of ABS-CBN, our good friends from GMA Television, and the like. Dr. Tan, would you have anything to say?
No, I think this is a very timely webinar because we have to raise the awareness of the people and educate the people about this election.
Yeah.
Thank you for this webinar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you too for joining us. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone who took time out. Isang mahalagang bagay po ito. Magdasal tayo, pero hindi sapat ang pagdarasal kung hindi kailangan din ng pagkilos. Have faith. The Filipino will do it. Tinagalan nga yung bayoneta ng Hapon. Pangako pa kaya ng politiko. God bless us all. Thank you.